Welcome to today's episode of CLCI Live, brought to you by the award-winning and ICF accredited school, Certified Life Coach Institute. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode.
Happy Mardi Gras.
What's up, everybody?
Mardi Gras. Welcome.
Happy Fat Tuesday.
Happy Fat Tuesday. There's all
What is-
kinds of names. We don't have any
I'm
beans. Do you have
I'm
any beans?
actually kind of dumb. What does Fat Tuesday
Sorry.
mean?
Yeah.
I have to
I
take
mean-
offense to that name.
You get fat because it's the right before the hiatus of Lent. You're gonna give up something, so the idea is to get
To
quote
live
unquote
in
fat.
gluttony, or gluttony.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
To live in gluttony for one day before you have to participate in abstaining from things.
yes, something of your choosing. Yeah, so
So they got a holiday for everyone then.
yeah. Well,
Yes.
this is more like a week-long expedition.
What's my holiday?
In New Orleans it is. We have the whole week off.
You already said Fat Tuesday.
And I take offense to that statement.
You said.
I'm just gonna keep saying it over and over every time you say Fat Tuesday.
What's my holiday?
Tell us.
I feel
My
like that
wedding.
being set up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Your wedding, yes, July 2nd. July 2nd.
Which everyone who's watching this is invited to.
Oops.
Y'all got money?
You're invited to send Sam beautiful thoughts, well wishes,
And lots of money.
and lots of money.
Hey, you're invited to buy his gift registry stuff and all that. Go ahead for that.
I love
You're
it.
not, you're not coming to the wedding,
Yeah, no.
but
I took a look at that. There's some nice stuff on there.
I haven't looked yet.
Yeah.
We're sharing this, right?
Yeah,
We're sharing this?
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about today?
we're talking about ego.
We're talking about ego.
Yeah, unmasking the ideas that we have adapted to through our history negatively about ego, and really recognizing it serves a purpose, and it's not negative or positive, it just is. So we're going to talk about different aspects of ego. Should I take my mask off now?
Now you're-
Unmask yourself. I don't know. What's your ego say?
No.
Hello. All right. So, I'm gonna really quick ask a question. I mean, ego can be. I have this in my hand. Right there. That's ego. Ego can be a lot of things. There's a psychological textbook definition that you'll get, when you delve into Freud and Jung and all of that good stuff. What are we defining ego as in this situation?
I would like to think of it as what you allow yourself, so your personality, but on the same note, what you allow the world to see who you are and your personality.
I like to think of it as the mediator between the good side of you, the perceived good side of you, and the perceived bad side of you. So whatever you put in, your ego is going to reflect that. If you want the real terms, but the mediator between it and the superego.
Mm-hmm. What about the shadow, though? He plays a role in all that too.
I think we're mixing our Jungian and Freudian concepts now.
We are now.
Yeah, I'm more with Sam. Even though I'm a Freudian skeptic, ego is sort of what is right below the surface, and sort of what filters all of the inside stuff into outside stuff. So it's how you present yourself to the world, pretty much how you want to be seen, and it's what filters your actions essentially for the rest of reality to sort of take on. So that's this, I guess, more scholarly definition of ego. But when we talk about ego, we say things like, "Oh, you're letting your ego take over,"
Exactly,
or
that's
"You're
where
being
everyone-
egotistical," which is another way to say self-centered. So it's essentially what you think of as the self.
Well, I think that yes, that's a very good point. It's being self-centered. It's not only self-centered but insecure, which is all self-oriented, very much so. So, but that's sort of what we're delving into. Is a lot of times in our society, its ego is seen as this sort of negative aspect of people. And I know even myself, I'll be like, well, that's ego right there. And it's a way for me to sort of check myself and go, okay, wait, right now you got to stop being, that's you being egotistical or insecure is really what it comes down to time, I think. And there's, so, I mean, that concept of what ego is also very much ingrained is what is it for our society? What is it for in our day to day? How do we see ego in others? How about that?
How do we see ego in others?
Yeah. How does ego present in others, like from an outside perspective?
It's usually the snap reactions to things that are said, things that are done, things that they don't necessarily agree with. And it's that reaction that sometimes people step back and they're like, oh, wow, that was me. Like what you said, Brooke. Oh, that's ego. That's me. That's not necessarily the best version of myself in that moment.
So
and there's more I wanted to add, but I'm gonna
step into that, but turn it to positive. Turn it to a positive ego expression versus something that our insecurity or our fears. What's a positive way ego works in that same similar space?
A positive way the ego works in that sense is when you take into account that the ego is is coming up to protect you from a perceived threat. Whether or not it's rising up there because it's sending the message to your nervous system that something just does not agree with the situation. If you can take the time to slow down and not just say, I need to keep my ego down, but instead look and say, all right, what are you trying to protect me from? That's a positive manifestation of your ego. Because even if the reaction is not good, I don't want to say filtration, but the vetting of what that ego is saying, hey, something's wrong here. That's a healthy expression of it, albeit much longer.
Mm-hmm. So a saving, a safety, a recognition of danger coming, and a reaction to danger. Ego saves the day in that space. But how about in an everyday, normal, non reactionary space, how does ego show up? What?
Well, I've got, so, I mean, ego shows up, I think, every day. You can say that we get up, we get ready, we brush our hair, we put ourselves together, we make sure we're presenting ourselves, putting our best foot forward. A lot of folks could say that's an expression of ego, right? Yeah. Why do we do that? Because we want maybe people to take us seriously. We want to be successful in knowing that we exist in a society that people innately judge, innately categorize. I'm not going to say judge because I'm not opposed to judgment, but that they categorize. They're based on your look, based on your exterior, based on the way you act, speak, behave. You are going to probably quickly be deemed as one thing or another by another human being. And so we put ourselves together, and you could say that's our ego, in order to succeed. I mean, some do it to succeed, some do it to rebel, some do it to, whatever it may be, in any given situation. And that it can be considered an expression of ego. I think in like the simplest and most cartoony of terms, when we think ego maniacal, we think of like Johnny Bravo kind of dude with a big chin and like perfect hair.
Hey, how's it going, Mama?
I'm fantastic.
Bravo doesn't train legs.
Beauty and the Beast. What was the character? The
Beast was egotistical. That's why he was turned into a beast. Because
right, but there's another character in there that wanted to marry Belle. What was his name?
Oh, Gaston. I love it, Gaston. Yes. No one. Sorry, I'm done. Gaston. No one's chest is incredible as Gaston.
So I think even here we can say we have ego present because we have to put on a conversation. I, as an introvert, have to step into more extrovert concepts and behaviors. So I, as an introvert, will take on a persona of being able to have this conversation, being able to share with you, and that takes on a different nuance than when
Would
I
you
am
call that?
private space.
Would
What?
you call that an alter ego?
Oh.
Super ego.
I mean, it was funny as I was doing research for this concept, something that kept coming up was the benefits of alter ego. And what an interesting word, an alter ego and concept. You know, you've got Superman who's very divided, Batman. But they have alter egos, and the benefit of an alter ego is you can adorn a different sort of person based on the needs of any given situation. So it's an interesting thought process and concept to begin with, and again, always that's beneficial, right? In this, the way we're speaking of ego right now, we're speaking of it in a very beneficial kind of way, are we not? The reality is we have to have some ego. We do, to be successful, to do what we do, to get up here and talk. Like Lisa said, there's got to be some ego here, and it's not hurting us. When does it become dangerous? I'm curious.
You start to, I would say, weaponize your personality traits, and that can be hard to sometimes catch because, again, we're speaking about ego here, and this is who you are. It's really hard sometimes to get outside of yourself and catch when you are, again, doing something like for example, weaponizing some of your characteristic traits.
And I did something. I completely forgot to do something. And we've had people saying Happy Tuesday to us. Tara Ridgway said Happy Tuesday. Donna the Joe said Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I just want to remind everybody to please comment. We want to hear from you as you're watching. Please give back to the conversation. We are monitoring the chat, and we do want to hear from you. Forgot to do that. So what were you saying, Jerome?
We were speaking about weaponizing your characteristic traits.
Yeah.
When embracing your ego, when that becomes dangerous, doing things such as that is really.
I was gonna add. I don't know what I was watching, but something recently about influencer culture, entrepreneur culture, like streamer culture. Essentially, you are monetizing your personality out there for the world, and you're like who you are is the product essentially. And I think a lot of life coaches, they'll see I was trying to do a Tony Robbins impression earlier, but they'll see influencers who are also coaches who are putting themselves out there to become famous, and not a lot of people are prepared to start, I guess, capitalizing on their own image and trying to sell that image to bring people in as clients. So that's one way where it's all about ego essentially. When you try to sell yourself, on social media and make yourself an influencer, and then trying to get that following to bring in business. And then things get really weird when your ego and your personality have actual effects on your business, who you are, what you can say on social media, what you can and can't normally do, and people aren't really prepared for that sometimes.
Yeah. And to add a little bit to that, the influencer culture, I'm so glad you brought that up, because another way that ego can be dangerous is when that image, whether it's on or off of social media, becomes an overglorification of you versus the world. It's like, this is who I am, and it becomes almost a competition to be better than people, as opposed to respecting the differences between people and perspectives. So when you look at life as like, oh, I gotta protect myself at all costs, when ain't no threat present, that's toxic.
Well, yeah, I mean we can delve into the psychology there, but that brings up a great point. Is the concept of ego? There's a concept, it's called ego strength, and And what that is the definition of that is basically somebody's ability to maintain their identity, to know who they are, and know who they are completely and wholly. And this is a place where ego can become very beneficial. And I also think it's something that's very important when you're out there putting yourself out there, because you have to put yourself out there and know who you are. You can't be wishy-washy when people will jump on that in a minute. Like, you have to be committed and believe in what it is, your product you're presenting. And yes, I agree, Sam. You can do that without knocking down others. We can all exist in the same space and appreciate what one another is doing. But it's that concept of knowing who you are and how important it is, and how important it is to be authentic when you put yourself out there and real. Because if you're wishy-washy and all, yes to everything, and you don't have for me, that's a mess. I would never want to work with that person.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I throw a wrench in there really quickly on that? Let's say that you are a wishy-washy person and you're a wishy-washy person working through that. There's a difference.
What are you using your wishy-washy to your advantage?
You're real in your wishy-washy, and that is so strong. Now, whether that's wise, that's subject for discussion depending on who's watching you. But it's like, I'm Mr. Wishy-Washy and I'm working.
No, but at least he knows who he is. I mean, at least he knows who he is at that point. But does that make him wishy-washy? Because he's committed. So that's hard. That's hard for me. That is kind of in fighting itself at that point. I'm committed to being uncommitted. Which is just kind of funny. But I don't know, my philosophy though, like where this kind of runs into a wall for me is I it's like I could call myself an anti-labelist, but the moment I did that, I would be an oxymoron. So I don't do that. So but I'm very committed and very endowed, or we will fight to the death for my right to be whoever I want at any given moment. And that can change, right? But for me, I find that consistency for me is a very good thing. But I also support somebody else's right to change, to be a different person today than they were yesterday, and to not have to, be second guessed the whole way. I think that we as people can be anything at any time. And I think there's something beautiful about that. So, that's where it gets hard, because I want people to be able to just be whoever, but that's that authentic piece. As long as you're being authentic, you know what I mean? But then again,
now my question is, what if being inauthentic is part of who you are?
I know, that's what I'm saying, but who am I to judge? I can't, because what if that's who I quit, I'm out of here.
So taking this even to another direction, are you the same person at work as when you go home?
Well, so this is an interesting.
I work from home, so exactly count for me.
You too? Wow.
Well, okay. Well,
so I can
note,
argue with you, Anthony. I can argue with you. You are not the same person, because when I talk with you, you are forced to talk. And you don't want to talk. You are stepping up into letting that ego be present and sustain you in that moment that you and I have to have a conversation. I notice I use the word have to.
I'm generally, my preferred state of existence is just like keep my head down. I don't talk to anybody and I just get the work done. But then, that's not really how work works. What
is that, your habit?
I mean, that's
or your
at work,
personality?
You're also,
and which one's you?
But so this is a good. This is, I think, am I frozen, or is it just Anthony?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So with regard to that, there's it's another book, I bring it up all the time, but Worth to Change Minds. It's sort of based in, what it's based in is talks about how personality tests are kind of silly, because a lot of times they don't take into account that we as people are different in every situation that we're in. I could be different when I'm talking to Sam than I am when I'm different when I'm talking to Sam and Jerome, and then different when I'm talking to Sam at work than when I'm talking to Sam on a live. And like, I, as a person, can have a lot of flex and change in my personality based on what I'm doing and in that kind of space. which I mean, it's interesting. You can't discount that. You can't. And is it fair for us to say that somebody is ego soft instead of ego strong, right? Because they are somebody who's very sort of changey. But where I struggle with that is I need consistency in people I'm around. Otherwise, I don't know what to do with them. I'm like, you know what I mean?
Well, I
So it's
think. Go
weird
ahead.
space.
I think that if we can make a clear distinction on whether someone is if someone is comprised of the actions that they are in work versus the actions that they are in their house versus the actions that they are in school. I was going somewhere with that. It flew away. But what I'm trying to say is, are we basing who someone is based on their actions in a given place, or is there something else that really defines Anthony as Anthony and Lisa is Lisa, Jerome is Jerome, and Brooke is Brooke? Like, who are you?
Now we're getting deep.
I'm-
We're getting deep, man.
5 life coaches walk into a room.
So I'm for the opinion, this is an opinion of mine, that there is no real Anthony per se. There's not like Anthony's the way he is at work, but the real Anthony is when he's sitting in an empty room by himself with nothing else going on or no interaction or whatever going on in my mind. The real Anthony is just the collection of all of my actions and the internal stuff going on in my head, and that only means anything to myself at the end of the day because I'm stuck with being in my own brain, just like everybody else is. And I'm very skeptical of people who tell me like, I need to find the real me because I don't feel like I'm the real me elsewhere. Where that's fine to think, but when somebody tells me that, I'm like, no, that is the real you, and everything else is the real you. It's all real, and even if you feel like you're being fake, you're still doing something that is an action.
That brings me to this sort of the Jungian kind of concept in this, and that's that shadow moment, that moment that ego steps in to protect parts of ourselves. When we feel like we aren't being ourselves, it's often because we are behaving out of characteristic of our values, of like the way that we have defined ourselves, the way that our ego has defined itself. And when we deviate from that is when we start to go, "Hey, I'm not acting like Brooke. I don't know who that person is." And that's the shadow work, right? That's when that concept of shadow work comes and going, okay, let's explore that so that then maybe you can face the parts of yourselves that you don't like and realize that's a part of you too and be able to manage that. But I mean, you're right to be skeptical because it's somebody who is clearly they're not taking, I guess, full responsibility at that point, really, I would say. Sam, you look like you've got something to brew in there.
Girl, you got me about to jump out my chair. But what you said as far as values is concerned, I think that's so I love it so much because when I think of who the real person is, I think deeper than just values, and the word that pops up for me is foundation. Like, who do you rest upon come hell or high water? And what are the non-negotiable strong towers that your life is built upon? And from that, what do you value at that point?
Cornerstones, right? Like the cornerstones.
Boom.
Not that there only has to be 4, you can have a lot of corners. But yeah, that corners, those quintessential pinnacle things that are going to support the rest of you. But things happen, and what happens is we get beaten up. We're growing up and people tell us not to act like that, not to do that. We hang out with this people and we start to second guess who we are, and that's when we become ego soft, right? And that's when we start to just sort of behave like birds of a feather, and you maybe aren't working and living within your true self at that point, which at the beginning of this, Anthony defined ego as self. Again, this is good ego work. Knowing who you are is good, because in that, when that ego comes up, that's a big sign that, oh my God, it's here for a reason. I'm here for a reason. That means something is not jiving. right? And that's a time to do some real like internal work with yourself. It's a big sign.
Yeah,
Um,
that work of who am I if nobody told me who I was? It's that self-defining direction and ownership of what you want your beliefs and ideals to be, the cornerstones like you're talking about, Brooke. Exactly. Yeah.
there's a there's this concept. It's called enneagram, which is an interesting. I've brought it up. It's something that I was kind of obsessed with for a while, and so it brings up the concept of vice versus virtue, and it divides us as people very much how we're sort of divided into two things. But what's interesting about it is it discusses how eventually your vice, your virtue, will be what destroys you and what holds you back, essentially. Because what'll happen is you're going to define yourself as one thing. I'm going to define myself as an overachiever, right? I'm an overachiever. And I live within this space for so long that what happens is all these other things start to go awry, and I'm missing out on other parts of my personality because I am an overachiever. They say that overachievers are prone to sort of exaggeration because they want to appear like they're doing better, like they want to appear like they're doing great. They're prone to not asking for help. They're prone to these kind of things that overachievers do. So you're this great thing about yourself that maybe has gotten you so far eventually will become sort of the thing that holds you back. And what's cool about that is when you explore that space and sort of break it down and start to realize, oh my gosh, this is where how my ego has held me back. I can explore it, and now I can be this other person and do that shadow work kind of thing, this other side of myself, and become a whole human being at that point. It's a very cool concept that sort of, it's very simplistic. Again, we're much more complicated. And, it's one of those ways that I like that concept of it's living in as something, but then breaking it down and becoming the other side of yourself, finding the good and the bad, the light and the dark, and realizing that it does exist on both sides. So, it's quiet now. We're very quiet.
Yeah,
Everybody's deep in thought. We're thinking.
Again, 5 life coaches are in a room. And we're not even talking about the chat.
And this is life coaching.
everywhere.
This is when we get to just talk, so it's nice.
Well, let's bring it into life coaching. I mean, that's what we're helping the clients figure out who they are in that space and providing that safe space. So in coaching, they identify what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and make changes that they want to make. But one cannot exist without the other. As you were talking about that yin and yang, the white and the dark, one cannot exist without the other. That all are part of the same whole. So when we think about coaching and who we're coaching, us being aware of this and doing our internal work through this is also very beneficial when we're ready to help that client. That client's going to want, a lot of the times they don't know what they're coming in for. They'll tell you one thing, but in the end they're working on some shadow work or what they're identifying as their ego, and how it doesn't serve them. Finding out how it does serve them is equally as important.
I want to say that as you were sharing, I was thinking, I was going to ask you guys, 5 life coaches in a room, how much or how often is what we're really working with our clients about ultimately about confidence?
I would say most of the time.
About confidence, right?
Yeah,
most of the time.
Almost 100%. Mm-hmm.
And you could say confidence is that ego strength, right? That I have the confidence to make these decisions and realize this is what's right for me, mm-hmm. Right? And that's, I think, boom. What?
Like even looking at us, all of us being certified / credentialed life coaches, we all have we've all exemplified that ego strength by virtue of the fact that we're here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Brooke, to go further with that confidence thing about like how most clients like coach about confidence, I would be even more specific to say, I mean, in my experience with some of my clients and people I've seen coaching, it's and this applies to new coaches too. It's incorporating the identity of being a coach into your ego. And from the very early on parts, people there's like an issue going on where they have their idea of themselves here, the coach is over here, and there's this gap, and it seems like a very large gap to a lot of people. Like, that's not me. How do I
How do I get
how do I get there so that I'm a coach? And
well, yeah, that's the new coach. Like they so many of them don't feel good enough, right?
mhm.
And they're like, I don't know if I'm good enough to get out there and coach people. I don't know. And it drives me nuts because I'm like, you're asking questions. They have all the answers. They're coming through the door with every answer. You don't need to give them
But
anything.
isn't there something more? Don't I have to have the voice of Tony Robbins?
I would say this is a great space when embracing your ego is going to be beneficial as a coach. So understanding that you do have the ability to go out, and you're not perfect. We all should understand that, but you do have just kind of what Brooke was mentioning. You do have enough. You do have the tools to be a good coach.
And maybe it's not. Maybe you go out there and you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But get out there and do it, and you know what? You're gonna get that. It's gonna happen. If you get out and do it, it's gonna be. The more you sit there and think about it, right? But that's it's okay to not know what you're doing. Just get out there. But I think even if you're scared, even if your ego is saying don't do it, it's about pushing through that, right? It's about getting past that. Is that getting past your ego at that point? Because is the ego stopping you?
I think it is the ego that's stopping them. It's the fear that is preventing them, and then that overthinking, analytical side of it that says, "Who am I to tell that?" See, that's what you already comment. I'm not telling anybody what to do, and that's that deviation and that disconnect of what coaching is. We are not telling our clients what to do. Then the next question I get is, well, how do you know how to ask those questions? I don't even know what questions to ask. Where do you get all those questions? And honestly, when you're just getting into this ego persona of what coaching is and what coaching does, when you are living, breathing, sleeping, and practicing the process, it comes organically. You are interested in what that other client, what that client is saying. You are interested. You don't have to be interesting. I heard this like 10 years ago, that statement. And it's an incredible statement because it gives us permission that we don't have to be the performer in this moment, that we just have to be there holding safe space. I call it sacred space because we are holding that space and helping that client find their identity, let's say, or compassion, or next move, what they want to experiment with, whatever direction we're going with that.
Yeah.
I want to say that oh, go ahead, Sam. You go first.
There was just something that when y'all were talking about the ego protecting us as new coaches, I don't know how many coaches are actually in the room right now that are in the chat, but when you keep in mind that the ego is there to protect us from something, and that thing in the new coach's space is looking stupid or looking bad or asking the wrong questions, when you go out there and you make that mistake, you realize, number one, the ego was protecting you from something that was pretty small. And in that, you might not get all the answers to who you are, but at least you figure out really fast what you're not. And that's a failure for making a mistake. Because I screwed up during a coaching session this morning. I'll admit it. I cheerleaded on. I was like, good job. And I was like, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have said that. Listen, when the grenade went off, nobody died. So,
right?
So if you're afraid of like an explosion of dead bodies because you made a mistake in coaching, not literal, figurative.
Yes.
Not literal dead bodies. We don't do that here. Y'all ain't a failure because you go out there making just make the mistake and realize, wasn't that bad, and what's my ego protecting me from?
It's well, to really quick, one of the things I would say is there's nobody's life on the line. Like, there's no fires right now. There's nobody. We're not. If we're in a space where we're having to save somebody's life, we're not doing coaching. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. You are doing something else, I guarantee you. So take a deep breath and realize that the client has all the answers. They're in control, and they're going to go out and do whatever they want when they leave. None of it is up to you. So, but one thing I was thinking about this, because one of the things we say in class, and I think it's kind of a misnomer now that we're having this discussion, is we talk about how we're ego out there beforehand to get people in the door. But once the door shuts, boom, our ego goes away. But I don't think our ego can go away at that point, and I don't think it should. I think the ego is there to be ego strong, to know who we are, know that we're coaches, know what our job is, and to know that we can check all that things going on in here so that we can be curious and interested and be that blank slate and that mirror. I think that it's important to know who you are and to not have to be giving that advice, and to know that you're a coach so that you can coach better. And that's where ego is good for your coach, right? Am I wrong there?
Nah, you ain't told no lie.
I think it's a really possibility of enhancing, if we're saying on the side that is growth filled support with our clients versus not going on the fear based side of things, it can be very beneficial. Right? We're not inducing the amygdala hijacking concept. We're inducing questions and curiosity and pushing ourselves to be more curious with what our clients are asking in a calm state.
Anthony, what is it called when you take a word and you put AL at the end of it? Like judgment, judgmental, ego, maniacal. Like
it's an affix. You're like affixing an affix to like change the word from like a noun to an adjective.
We're changing it from a noun to an adjective. Because it's
ego,
so
egotistical, noun to adjective.
Ego is not a bad thing. Egomaniacal is bad. So when it becomes an adjective, it's a bad for you. Judgment is not bad. Judgmental is bad, which is just an interesting. And when it becomes a trait at that point, I guess, is when you should check yourself. There's a word that comes to mind in all of this for me when we're talking about ego strength and knowing who you are. And that's awareness, and that's self-awareness. And it just seems like this is something that resonates in like almost every conversation, is how critical self-awareness is in just in life. To be, I mean, but who am I to judge who's being successful and who's not? But for me to be successful, self-awareness is critical. There we go. That's what I'm going to say. May not be for others.
Did you know, though, like when we're talking about self-awareness in the self, ego is a Latin word. The literal translation is I. That's it. When you say I, it's just ego. It's the same exact thing. There's no meaningful difference.
That's cool.
So when we're talking about self-awareness, you're talking about ego awareness. Whenever you refer to the self or I, there it is. That's ego.
And I strength. I like that too. Like I strength. If I'm I strong, like it's I know who I am. I am comfortable in it. I am good with in my own skin. I'm grateful because there have been times. I mean, I think I was lucky enough to sort of know who I was to some degree younger, but than some others in that regard. But just to sort of like be comfortable in my own skin, like that's a nice thing, to be just unafraid of being me. Even though I'm a goofy spaz.
I feel like all of us in some way, shape, or form are all goofy. We just don't want to show it.
Oh, I'll show it. I'm no shame.
Anthony, even you.
Well, and that's interesting too. No. When we are showing, it's interesting how, because what we do is we create these walls, right? We get hurt along the way and we build walls and we change who we are and we stop behaving in ways that are authentic to ourselves. And it becomes this thing that when we can find a group of people or somebody that we can be our true self with, where we can show them all the sides of ourselves, it's this tremendous vulnerability that happens, right? But it's also a space of tremendous trust and building of connection between two people, is when you feel like you found a space where you can truly be you. That's a very powerful space to be in, and that's actually something we try to teach our coaches to create. I think it's one of the things that is overlooked. The benefits of having a coach is that safe space where you can walk in the door and be 100% you, and you're not gonna, let's do this, it's you, we're curious, we want to know. Because I think most people feel like in the world that we have to adorn the alter ego based on where we're at and who we're around.
I mean, you can always be weird like me and just stand in the middle of a road and let your weird flag fly.
You see
And
my
by
cup?
doing that, you give other people permission to be who they are too, because in a world of mass, they found the one person that didn't have one.
Fly your freak flag high. Fly your freak flag high.
Is that
my
what
cup. I myself am strange and unusual. But that's where that like one of the question I wrote down to ask you guys to sort of recap the end of this is, how do we empower others to be ego strong? What can we do as not just coaches but as human beings to empower others to be ego strong, to be themselves?
Give yourself a go. Who was starting? That was you, Jerome.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think it's important to bring the realization that prioritizing of oneself as opposed to the potential backlash or whatever you want to call it coming from those that you're trying to, I guess, go ahead and project a different personality type, or kind of hold back on who you are as a person when it comes to projecting that ego. I think prioritizing the benefit of being and settling yourself, settling into that ego, understanding that outweighs the potential pitfalls of maybe, like we're talking about, being goofy, being a little embarrassing at sometimes. And that one random person who you'll probably never ever see again might say something under their breath. Who cares? I think understanding that that priority of being yourself as opposed to, again, the potential pitfalls, and understanding that is really important in that space.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what you said as far as the people you'll probably never see again, listen, I'm not old at all, but the longer that I've watched people, the more I realize that people are predominantly more concerned about their own stuff than they ever will be of you. So with that, like, I guarantee you within a month's time, y'all are going to forget that I had a gray shirt underneath this cardigan. Or
Not me.
Not me.
See,
Not
now
me.
that I said
Not
it, of
me.
course, now you're going to make an effort to say
No.
that.
I have a superpower.
Oh, there's that ego from both of y'all.
It is an ego, but I have a weird superpower where I have a nearly eidetic memory for what people wear.
I'm sending a reminder for myself in Slack to remind me in like a year.
Yeah.
Shirt on March.
So let's see. I think I will know Anthony is wearing a black shirt. I can almost guarantee it.
Anthony always wore a black shirt.
That's just what it's gonna be. Because I have no sense of self or identity. I don't share anything, by what I wear. I try to be
That's why
huge.
you impersonated Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
But
So I have some really wonderful clients that I have worked with in the history of me and currently, and many of them are definite history makers in the sense of who they are, how they represent themselves, and who they interact with. And they're very humble people. They are amazingly humble. And the difference, humble versus the ego that helps you be in this space. It's not being, what's the opposite of humble? Humble, unhumble. But Anthony, what's my proper term?
bravado.
Unhumble.
What is it?
Unhumble. Sure.
Yeah, so it's the opposite. So being in humble, you can still be in the side of the ego that shares your message, that shares your uniqueness, that shares who you are out there in the world, finding your voice. It's really important that we hear your voice. We encourage our clients as much as possible for their voices to be heard. You've got something to say. Being humble allows us to hear it in a way that we are able to absorb the information versus somebody who is egotistical, as we were talking a few moments ago. A lot of the time, somebody in that egotistical space, we can't hear what they're saying because we're not in alignment with that. But somebody in their humble place, having a voice is really important. And a lot of the times, that's what we're helping our clients do, find their voice and still maintaining their ability to feel like they're in their humble behavior.
One of the qualities of a good leader, and one of the if you've ever taken a class in negotiation strategy or anything of that, one of the first things they'll tell you is to never walk in a room and tell people what to do, but to walk in a room and ask everybody's opinion, to walk in the room and talk to every person, to know their name, to address them, and to get their input and feedback before you ever present your idea or your concept. You first take the time to listen and acknowledge others and their feedback, their importance, their opinion. And that's where that humble comes in, because it's the person that isn't willing to listen to others, that thinks they have all the answers, that is going to tell and get, that is immediate for me a big red flag. The person I respect is the person that walks in the room and goes, how are you? What's going on? Do you have feedback or input? What are we missing here? What can you do? That the person that's going to address everybody else and get their feedback before telling everybody else what to do. And that's, for me, equality is something very strong in leadership, and something I look for in a leader. Furthermore, too, there's an amazing saying. Well, we say this, believe in yourself all the time. And I've seen this, though I love that when you break it down and you can erase the leave and the in and the self, and you can just leave it at be you. And I love that concept of just being you, but it's so scary and so hard to do. And I think the way that we as people can help others to be themselves, right, to do that, is to give them a safe space, to ask them who they are, to ask for their feedback, to even if somebody's quiet, talk to them. You know what I mean? And realize that have that conversation and for a moment check your ego, right? So that you can listen to others. But that's not checking your ego. I think that's your ego being strong enough not to have to force yourself on anybody else, or to force your opinions or force your anything on anybody else.
Well, it's to check your shadow is what you're really talking about, is check that shadow piece that feels like it's got to defend its position, the piece that's got to protect itself, that fear-based insecurity. That's the piece that we're saying check.
I mean, one of the spaces that if you're talking politics, right, it's maddening. You look at people, it's like they are not ever going to listen to the other. It's a matter of principle. But if everybody just sort of stopped and went, hey, let's talk, like, what's your, why is this? But no, but you don't ever see people like actually, they have debates. They don't have conversations, right? They don't have, and it's maddening.
I one just now. I'm a shit. Oh no, I'm not going to say that. Not on this live.
And so it's like, if you just take a moment and go, hey, let's talk and actually listen, be a coach, actually listen to what that person has to say. I think it could be a tremendous way to empower others to be themselves.
You think Vladimir Putin needs a life coach?
Did we go there? We just went there.
He won't listen. He's got the shadow showing up.
I can't believe we just went there.
He's a lot more than a life coach.
Yeah. We're sending our
I think
best support, best energy to those who are connected and suffering through that process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Oh, just
okay, let's pivot and step out of Putin.
Just my ego is going off on the inside right now. I just want to like.
My. Sweet potato pie.
It's one, but there's a phrase that I've used with Lisa many times: is a lion doesn't have to tell you it's a lion.
Yes, it
you
does.
just know, right? It's there. You just know. So the moment you're in a room and somebody's like, "I'm a lion," you're like, "No, you're not."
You little kitty cat.
Isn't that like a quote from Tywin from like Game of Thrones or something like that?
It's been around longer than that. I know that.
I remember Tywin says that to Jaime in like one of the first episodes. I was like, "That's right."
Yep.
Oh yeah, I think you're right, Anthony. I think I remember that, but it's true. I mean, anybody that has ever said that aloud, it does not resonate. It just
the moment somebody says to you, "You should trust me," you're like,
"Oh my goodness."
The end of that, though.
Like we shouldn't have to announce what we are and who we are. It should just be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in yourself.
I was gonna say on the opposite end, sometimes just saying I'm a life coach, just put it out there.
Yes, that's true.
Enough. If you've been trying to like work your way and try to like figure out like the best way to like how do I start being a life coach, just start saying you're a life coach.
That's it.
That's fake it till you make it. Like, fake it till you make it. Like, smile even when you're feeling crappy, and it's gonna make you feel better. It just is.
Not even that. I'm talking about the people who've already graduated from our classes, who are certified life coaches or certified coaches. You're already there. You're already a coach.
Yep.
You did it.
Yeah.
Tap into that ego.
Walking it.
Tap into that ego.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2 minutes left, guys.
If you got to.
Final thoughts.
Okay. The ego is just that. It's the ego. It's you. Whether it is good, whether it is bad, it really depends on if you're weaponizing it, if you're looking at this as a means to combat people who might think differently from you. Once you start looking at, oh, I'm better than you, I am a lion, you should trust me, and you start overreacting to perceived threats without really looking at them, that's when ego is bad. There's a difference between having an ego problem and just simply having an ego. Have an ego, explore the ego, be aware of the road that you're on so you don't drive over potholes, and you will be fine. Stop trying to push the ego down and push the ego aside. Figure out what's going on with that and work with it. That's all I got.
I'm gonna just to tap into that really quick. I'm just gonna say that I'm just looking at the camera for this. You're good enough, right? Whoever you are, whatever it is, you are good enough, and you don't even have to believe that you're good enough. You just are. Period. And that is all I'm gonna say. Is that you are good enough. You're good enough. I don't care what you want to do, but you're good enough to do it. I mean, except for maybe perform brain surgery or rocket science, you might need some schooling. But that doesn't mean you can't. Just figure out what the next step is.
You're growing good enough for that.
I will say, just kind of piggybacking off of both Brooke and also Anthony, do it. Call yourself a life coach. I know I struggled with that early on, all the way up until, honestly, we started doing coaching sessions within the Institute with some of our alumni, our wonderful alumni. Just doing it, taking that first step, really is it's the start of that confidence that you need to continue and get out and finally be able to no longer have that disconnect between you and who you say you are. So I think taking that first step is, you can't really explain it in words, I don't think, but doing it, taking it, you can feel it, you understand it, and you understand how critical it is to do so.
I can tell you about my first step. Oh my gosh. It was a crazy experience. I have absolutely no idea what happened in that session. that session, I was so terrified. and it became that as you're saying, enough. I was enough for them in that moment, in that experience, asking, that basic framework that we stick to in level 1, the additional pieces that we learned from level 2, but just level 1, running with that information. While I don't really remember what occurred in that first session, my first session, my clients had to ask me to create that next appointment. What does that tell me? It means I was enough. It was enough for them to want more, for them to do their work. Get out there and do it.
Do the do.
Do the do.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony?
My final thought. I'm not an ego realist, so this is going to be a little bit different. But if you're trying to find yourself or discover the real you, it's probably not going to work out too well, because I don't believe in a self to find. But the benefit is you get to determine who you are. You get to build this ego and this self and this image of who you want to be throughout your entire life. You get to do this. So instead of trying to find who you really are, become who you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Boom, there it is.
I love that. Preach it. I mean, I love that because it gives you have permission to be whoever you want at any moment. Like, you can be anything you want at any given moment. I love that, because build that. Do what you need to do. Just do it. I mean, and you're not stuck being something you don't want to be. All it takes is you to change it. That's it. So that's all we've got for this. Ego is good. Be ego strong. Figure out who you are. Even though Anthony, in whatever way, there's not a good way to say it that would make Anthony happy. Build who you are. How about that? Create who you are. Become the creator of your own ego, your own sense of self. And you don't have to listen to anybody else in that process. Do what's right for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to all of the awesome comments. Happy Mardi Gras, everybody out there. I hope you're all not getting too wasted and you're enjoying good food. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you guys check out Certified Life Coach Institute. If you guys like this, make sure you share it, comment, do all of that good stuff. We appreciate the support. We need your support, so please do. Also, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the chat. We will respond to you. And check out Certified Life Coach Institute. And we do this every Tuesday at 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So check us out next week. All right.
Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Once again, this is brought to you by Certified Life Coach Institute. We're an ICF accredited school who certifies our life coaches in 3-day online intensive courses. In addition to other podcast episodes, feel free to check us out every Tuesday at 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time on YouTube or Facebook for our CLCI Lives, where we get together and discuss various topics that are centered around sharpening your skills so you can become a better certified life coach. For more information, feel free to visit us at certifiedlifecoachinstitute.com. Until next time, be well.